Welcome back. All right, so my continuing look at where teams are at now as we're in the first week of July, just finished the first week of July, getting into the second week of July. Seattle's an interesting one to look at. Now, in terms of cap space, right now they show on cap space of having $9,868,424 in cap space, but Vince Dunn's going to eat up a lot of that money. Vince Dunn's a restricted free agent. He is going to get paid, and so for Seattle, this is where the rubber meets the road for Ron Francis. So year one, they had a bad year, but he still had cap space. He used that cap space last offseason in order to build up his team. It clearly worked. Other moves he made worked as well, and so they went from 60 points to 100 this past season. The number one wild card in the West, completely unexpected. They were in the running for potentially first in the division at points this year. So there is some pressure now in Seattle, and this is the difference as we go into year three in October and year two last October. Nothing was expected than last October. Now, they were 6th in goals for this past season, 15th in goals against. If they can make their goals against a little bit better, and if they can keep scoring like that, we may be looking at a contender already in the National Hockey League. But there are some numbers to keep track of. So 40 goals for McCann. I don't know that the McCann hits 40 goals again. It feels like that was just everything going his way, sort of like William Karlsson in Vegas in year one, how everything went his way and Karlsson's numbers have fallen off. I would not be surprised to see McCann drop into a 30-goal range next season. So then the question mark becomes, so Matty Beniers, your Calder winner, 57-point producer, very likely to improve his point totals next season. How high do they go? Beniers is a very good two-way center, and he is going to get Selke votes, I think, at some point in his career. And Beniers, I think, has the offensive side of his game there as well. When he made his debut last season, I was very impressed by his two-way play right out of the gate. Didn't look like he needed a lot of time to adjust to the National Hockey League game at all. And Vince Dunn, 64 points. Dunn, it looks like, had a career year as well. And that's the tricky thing. He's a free agent. You want to keep him for 8 years if you're Seattle. You want to get him to that long-term contract. But are you expecting 64 points from him every year? Probably not. So that may be why we don't have a contract between the team and the player as of yet. And then there's Grubauer. Grubauer during the regular season, 17, 14, and 4, and 895 save percentage. At times, Martin Jones appeared to be the starter. Jones, of course, has gone to free agency. He had a fantastic record. And then in the playoffs, Grubauer goes 7-7 with a 903 save percentage. So for Grubauer, it really was a tale of two seasons. And in his first two regular seasons in Seattle, his numbers haven't been great. But with how he played in the playoffs, yeah, he's still the guy. And now he's going to try to do in the regular season this year what he did in the playoffs this past spring as well. So when we look at this team's forward group, I think this is a really solid bunch. So again, not worried about who's on what line or anything at this point. McCann, Burakovsky, Tolvanen, and Tanev. If that's your top four left wingers, you're in good shape. Now, they missed Burakovsky in the playoffs. Who knows how that series with Dallas might have turned out if they'd had Burakovsky, right? Maybe a couple more goals. Maybe they end up winning that series, and we could have had Seattle against Vegas in the conference final. Studenic has been picked up. He is on a 1-year contract. He's a restricted free agent next summer. Tolvanen's a restricted free agent next summer as well. Tolvanen, an excellent pickup by Seattle from the Nashville Predators. And then you got Cartier. Cartier, when he came up during the playoffs, looked good. And he had a good playoff run for Coachella Valley as well. So it's a good problem to have. It seems like they have too many guys on the wing, but are you really going to trade anybody? I don't think you are. So that's the reality of having depth. McCormick and Hughes are also there for depth. I would expect Coachella Valley to be very competitive again next season. Down the middle, Beniers, your number one center. Yep, in all likelihood, yes. Wenberg. Wenberg, of course, is a UFA next year. Beniers is an RFA next year. I would think the sooner you can get Beniers signed to a contract, the better, because he's not likely to get cheaper if they wait until the season gets started. Yanni Gourde has provided them with a lot of solid points and offense, and just generally his presence has been very welcome. And now it looks like he's probably going to end up being a third-line center, maybe he ends up second line. But for Yanni Gourde, we saw in Tampa what he can do if he's your third-line center, so we'll see what happens here. And Shane Wright. Shane Wright's one of those wild cards in this. But the interesting thing is, so they draft Wright. Wright falls to them. A lot of hype around Shane Wright, rightfully so. I understand that. But now this is a team where if Wright busts, so if Wright doesn't make it to the NHL, they're still a good team. So this is a team that they're number one draft pick in year 2 and all this hype. And if he doesn't make it, they're fine. And I would not have believed that if you told me that last summer. Belmar's been added, so there's your fourth line center in all likelihood. That gives Wright a chance to learn on the job. The way that they handled Wright this year, I think they made the correct decisions with him. But it's a matter of what happens now in the following year and how do you make this work? How do you get him to develop? And the right answer is to have him in Coachella Valley for the season. I believe he's still too young for that. So we'll see what Seattle does. I would think he breaks camp with the team to start the season. And then once you get to the 9-game mark for him, then the question marks begin. Podorowski in the minors gave them some good depth. And Henman. Henman's a restricted free agent next summer. Again, AHL depth there. On the right side, you'd have Eberle, who's a free agent in 2024. So maybe Eberle's numbers come up even further. Schwartz, I like Jaden Schwartz, as evidenced by me wearing his jersey. When Seattle joined the league, and I was like, well, I can get a jersey with a Seattle player on it. Schwartz was the one that worked the best for me. I liked Schwartz a lot when he was in St. Louis, so made sense that his work ethic would go to Seattle. And as long as he can stay healthy, he's a pretty good support scorer as well. Bjorkstrand, really smart pickup for them from Columbus last summer. Yamamoto, they buy low on him. He's a restricted free agent next summer. And if this works, again, Ron Francis is going to look brilliant. The thing is, Yamamoto on the fourth line, I don't know how you're going to make that work if he does end up on the fourth line. And again, when you look at their wingers, can Yamamoto be argued as being ahead of any of the wingers, whether he was on the right side, whether he was on the left side? If he played in the middle, would he project ahead of any of the top 3 centers? Not in all likelihood. So we'll see where Yamamoto slots into the lineup. John Hayden, he's reliable to pick up and use during the regular season here and there, and he can clear waivers going back down. He's a UFA next summer. Cole Lind is currently a restricted free agent with Seattle. That won't break the bank, but it will eat into some of this. Of course, at least it could. The one thing is, of course, Lind's going to be in the minors, so it shouldn't affect the cap space. The Dunn one's the really big one there. And then they drafted Chalet in the draft. Edward Chalet going there. And I keep wanting to say Sale or Saleh, so Chalet. Anyways, he ends up being drafted, I believe, 20th overall by Seattle, and we'll see how things go there. But again, for Seattle, they've got a pretty good team put together. There isn't any pressure on their prospects to rush into the lineup, which is odd, because again, I am used to the expansion teams from the 90s where they were bad. They would draft somebody, and it was kind of, how quickly can we get this guy in the lineup? We need him now. On the blue line, things are pretty good here too. So you've got Dunn, Larson, Alexiak, Borgen. Likely that's your top 4, although Dumoulin can get top 4 minutes. Schultz can get top 4 minutes. What it adds up to is a really solid top 6. And then outside of the top 6, you have Jacob Megna. Schultz and Megna are on expiring contracts. As I've mentioned a couple times now, Dunn, of course, restricted free agent. Cale Fleury's a restricted free agent currently as well. So Fleury's going to get a little bit of money here. Lynn's going to get a little bit of money, but the rest of it's all going to Dunn. And so it's up to Ron Francis to figure this out. Gustav Olofsson played well during Coachella Valley's run to the final as well. Connor Carrick picked up. He's on 1-year contract. He's a UFA next summer. Jimmy Schultz is a UFA next summer. And then here's the wild card in the midst of all this. So I watched, the last 3 or 4 games of that final in the Calder Cup there between Coachella Valley and the Hershey Bears. Riker Evans is ready. Riker Evans looks like he is going to be a beast in the National Hockey League. So would Seattle potentially, if Evans comes into camp and he's playing really well and he's forcing himself into, at least the conversation for a job, do you make a trade? Do you stick Evans back down in Coachella Valley for 1 more year, or do you bring him up? And I think that's a fascinating discussion to have, because, again, I really liked his game in the Calder Cup final. I really think he's ready. And so I would be kind of surprised if Seattle doesn't have room. And yet, when you look at this lineup, there really isn't room for him at the National Hockey League level unless Borgen comes out and you put him on the right side. And again, it's not it's not outside of the realm of possibility for a guy to play if he's a left-handed defenseman to play on the right side. It's just not optimal. And I would think for a rookie breaking into the NHL, putting him on the other side, again, would not necessarily be optimal. But Evans is very talented. I think if he does as well in training camp as I think he can, he's going to make Ron Francis have a bit of a headache, a difficult decision. The kind of headache you want as a GM is having too many good players. This is a good thing. And then goaltending. So goaltending, you've got Grubauer as the starter. Decord should be given that chance at the backup role. Drieger's in the final year of his contract, of course, dealing with injury and all of that. He'll want to prove himself. The battle for backup could be a lot of fun. And then you've got Kakko down in the minors as well. And this is going to be an interesting battle for the backup job. And can Joey Daccord become a regular goaltender in the NHL with Seattle? I hope he does, because again, when we look at that run in the Calder Cup, Daccord was a huge part of how Coachella Valley got as far as they did. So how many players end up, getting that boost from that run for Coachella Valley? I think we'll see more players from that Firebirds lineup in the National Hockey League than we will see members of that Bears team that won the championship in the NHL this year. But we'll see. This is going to be a very interesting season for the Seattle Kraken because now the pressure is on them. It's going to be on Hackstall as well to once again show that he can coach this team into the playoffs. And if they're 6th in goals for again, and 5-on-5, they've been fantastic. They can improve their special teams. Sky could be the limit. But what do you think? Do you think Seattle is for real and they're going to make it in again? I do think back towards the start of the season when they were picked as the team that probably wasn't for real and probably wasn't going to make the playoffs, but they did. And so are we going to see that attitude as well this offseason where people say, you know what, Seattle had a good year, but they're probably not going to do it again. And then maybe teams swap them out of the playoffs and swap Calgary in. Maybe they swap St. Louis back in. I would say Vancouver, but I don't know that I can say that. But at any rate, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. What do you think of the Kraken? How impressed are you with what they did this season? And can they improve again next year? Can they reach 100+ points? Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.